We've already looked at the world's toughest triathlons, so I thought it was about time that we looked at the world's toughest triathletes. Narrowing it down isn't easy, as the sport of triathlon does tend to attract tough athletes. Now, there are incredible stories that come from our sport every year, and I'm excited to share some of those with you today. We're going to be delving back into the archives, looking at stories from the beginning of triathlon right up until the present day. And narrowing this down has not been easy, but for today's video, we've got our top 10. Right, let's begin by rewinding to the early years of triathlon and Ironman, back to 1989. And we're actually going to start with two, because it's pretty much impossible to separate on credentials of the toughest athlete between Mark Allen and Dave Scott. This race was dubbed the Iron War, as Scott and Allen battled it out shoulder to shoulder over the 140-mile Kona Ironman World Championship course. And up until now, it had been more about completion at the World Championships. Never had we seen quite such a close rivalry, and as a result, the course record was broken by almost 20 minutes. Their performances are still iconic within the triathlon history, the sheer determination that they demonstrated, refusing to give an inch. And to put it into perspective, their marathon times of a 2:40 and a 2:41 respectively still remain some of the fastest times recorded on that course, and that was almost 30 years ago. And before we move on, we can't talk about the toughest triathletes in the 80s without mentioning Julie Moss. It was 1982 when she was in the lead, just 2 miles to go to the finish, and dehydration hit her. She ended up having to crawl to the finish, but she was sadly passed by Kathleen McCartney, had to settle for second. But that moment has become iconic and an inspiration to many, including Mark Allen himself. I don't think there'll be many of you who haven't heard of Chrissie Wellington, the 4 times Ironman world champion. She first became world champion in 2007 in her first year as a pro, so she shocked not only her fellow competitors, but the world of triathlon itself. And she then went on to win another 2 years in a row. Sadly, in 2010, she had to drop out due to illness, but it was her performance in 2011 that has definitely marked her as one of the toughest triathletes of all time. But it was just 2 weeks before the World Championships that she suffered a bike accident, and as a result ended up with serious road rash. She had damage to her intercostal muscles, her pectoral muscles, so making breathing difficult, also walking difficult. She had to be helped out of the swimming pool even days before the race, and many people didn't even think she'd make it to that start line. But she not only made it onto the start line, she went and won her 4th Ironman World Championship title. Well, we're not limiting this list to pros, and this age group athlete certainly couldn't be left off the list after her accomplishments in Ironman racing in 2016. Rewind back to 2011, and Turia Pitt was competing in an ultramarathon in Australia when she got caught in a grass fire and ended up with 65% of her body suffering severe burns. She had to have her right hand amputated and 2 fingers of her left hand also removed. Another side effect of those horrific injuries means that Turia can no longer regulate her body temperature. Well, she decided to race her first Ironman in 2016 in Australia and then went on to compete in Kona. But it was the hot and humid conditions that really challenged her. But she did manage to complete the course in an incredible time of 14 hours and 37 minutes. Pro triathlete Suzie Cheatham certainly proved her credentials as a tough triathlete back in 2016 when she was racing Ironman 70.3 in South Africa. It was 70k into the bike when she ended up having a bike crash. She still had 20k to go, but she got back on her bike and made it into T2, where she received medical treatment for a severely damaged elbow. She had a lot of road rash as well, but she wasn't going to give up there. She made it back out onto the run, and it wasn't until she got to the finish that she realised quite how bad her injuries were. Well, she was whisked off to hospital, and it was there that they discovered she'd severely broken her elbow and it actually required wiring to put it back together. But despite all of that, she had managed to run through the pain and still finished 8th woman overall. Whilst we're on the topic of broken bones and racing through the pain, we really have to include Holly Lawrence. In 2017, she went into the World Championships for Ironman 70.3 as the defending world champion, but she didn't manage to defend her title. She didn't even manage to finish that race. As a result, she was determined to prove her doubters wrong in the following season. Well, she began that return very strongly. It's actually the end of 2017 when she won the Ironman 70.3 in Bahrain. And then this year in January, she started off strongly. She came 3rd at 70.3 Dubai and then followed that up with a 2nd place at Ironman 70.3 in Oceanside. But this was where she really proved her credentials as a tough athlete, because during the pike, she heard and felt a cracking feeling in her foot. And she completed the race, finishing second overall, so managing a half marathon run at the end of this. But it turned out she'd actually broken a bone in her foot and has put her out for the rest of the season. But she certainly did prove her doubters wrong on how tough she is. The ITU World Triathlon Series Grand Final in Cozumel, Mexico in 2016 was going to be a very exciting race. Going into that event, Johnny Brownlee was ranked second in the overall standings behind Mario Mola. Now, he needed to win. He also needed Mario Mola to finish fourth overall if he was going to take the title. We know that both of the Brownlee brothers are incredibly tough racers and great at raising their game when they need to, and it looked like Johnny was doing just that. He had a comfortable lead with only 1 kilometre to go, but then he started to suffer from heat exhaustion. He was staggering all over the road, and the Olympic bronze medalist Henry Schoeman went past him to take the win. And next, coming up behind, was his brother Alistair. Now, Alistair helped Johnny across the line. They made it in second and third, and then Johnny was whisked off to hospital. But it wasn't until after that he realised just how far he'd managed to push himself. Tim Don has had an illustrious career in triathlon, spanning several decades, but it wasn't until a horrific crash just days before the Ironman World Championships in Kona last year that has really cemented his place as one of the toughest triathletes of all time. It turned out that Tim had broken his neck and he was flown back to Boulder to have it operated on. He was given 3 separate options, but 2 of which would mean he would have restricted movement in his neck and most probably be unable to get back into that aero position, which is essential for any Ironman athlete. So he opted for the incredibly painful halo brace, which basically involved a metal contraption being screwed into his skull in order to get the best recovery. Well, he had to endure several months of wearing this incredibly uncomfortable contraption, but he didn't lose focus. In January, he had it removed and he was already training for Boston Marathon just in April, and he managed to run a 2-hour 49 marathon, and he's still got his eyes set firmly on Kona for this year. Australian elite triathlete Lauren Parker was on a training ride just a week before Ironman Australia when she suffered a double blowout and ended up crashing into a guardrail. She broke several bones, punctured a lung, and most significantly broke her back, which resulted in her having no feeling from her legs downwards. Once Lauren had begun to come to terms with the fact that she might never walk again, she managed to start to focus on para-triathlon. And an incredible 9 months after her accident, she found herself competing and ended up on the podium at the Oceania Para-Triathlon Championships. And then less than a year after her accident, it was the Commonwealth Games, so competing on home soil in Australia, she went on to win the bronze medal. April 2017, having only just turned pro, Sarah Lewis suffered quite a serious bike crash when a driver pulled across the road in front of her without indicating as she went through the rear side window. As a result, she required more than 60 stitches, and the week previously, she'd only just had a collision with another cyclist and still had a hip injury from that. But less than 2 months later, she was racing at Challenge Denmark and finished 4th, beating the likes of Ironman winner Michelle Vesterby. Well, she's had a strong start to this season, and I certainly think she's going to be one of the tough triathletes to look out for. You don't become Olympic champion, Ironman 70.3 world champion, 2 times Ironman world champion, and Ironman distance world record holder without a certain degree of toughness. Well, Jan Frodeno certainly proved his mental and physical toughness in Kona 2017 when he competed even though he was suffering a back injury. Having won the previous 2 World Championships, he went in as a strong favourite and didn't show any sign of injury. Coming out of T2, he was in 4th place, is still very much in contention, but just a few kilometres into the 42-kilometre run, we saw Jan Frodeno walking, and during that run he even at one point lay down to try and alleviate this back pain, but he didn't give up. He walked, limped to the finish and came home in 35th place. I don't know about you, but I'm feeling incredibly inspired after this. Now, at the beginning, I did allude to the fact that this was a list of just 10 of the toughest triathletes, and I'm aware that the list goes far beyond this, so do let me know in the comments section below who you think is the toughest triathlete in the world. If you haven't done so yet, hit the globe to subscribe. And if you want to see our video that we made on the toughest triathlons, that's just here. And if you want to see our top Kona facts, that video is just here.